When Maurice Carver pushed open the door of a small bakery on Marigold Street on a Saturday morning in late April, the bell above it rang the same two notes it had rung when he was 22 years old. He had not been back to Eaton Springs in a long time. He'd come for a ribbon cutting that afternoon, a community center with his late mother's name on it, and he had an hour to kill and a hole in his chest he had been ignoring for 2 decades. He was dressed plain. Gray Henley, old jeans, no watch, no entourage idling at the curb. 3 championship rings in a safe 1,000 miles away. A net worth that did not fit on a single line. And a face that, in this particular bakery, did not register as famous at all, only as familiar. The woman behind the counter looked up with a baker's automatic smile already half-formed. Then she saw who it was, and the smile died. Camille Boudreau had been the first person Maurice Carver ever loved. She was 41 now, flower to the elbows, a streak of gray she hadn't bothered to hide, and her eyes had gone wide and then frightened in the space of a single breath. Not happy. Not warm. Frightened. "Maurice," she said. And then, too fast, her hand already reaching for a dish towel like a shield. "We're actually about to close the kitchen for prep. You'd be better off at the diner." It was 8:40 in the morning. The open sign was still swinging, and Maurice Carver stood in the doorway of the place he'd dreamed about for 20 years and watched the only girl he'd ever proposed to try to get him out the door. He said absolutely nothing. He didn't leave. He let his eyes move, slowly, the way they always did when a room was hiding something from him. The first thing he saw was the door frame behind the counter. Penciled hash marks climbing it, the way parents mark a child's height. Each one dated. A name written sideways beside the tallest. S, age 14, already taller than Mama. The second thing was a photograph on the shelf by the register, turned at a slight angle, as if someone had nudged it away from the door. A teenage girl in a basketball jersey, mid-jump, the ball just leaving her fingertips, long, powerful, familiar in a way he couldn't place and couldn't stop looking at. The third thing was a sound from the back. The unmistakable rhythm of a basketball being dribbled on concrete in the alley behind the shop. Slow, patient. A crossover, then again. Someone out there who knew exactly what they were doing. The fourth thing was Camille's own hand, which had drifted up to her throat, where a thin gold chain disappeared into her collar. When she noticed him notice, she pressed her palm flat over it. On the chain, he was almost certain, was a ring. He knew, because he had bought it with his first real paycheck 20 years ago. The fifth thing was a letter. Opened, half-tucked under the register. A college logo at the top, the words Athletic Scholarship visible above her thumb. Maurice noticed every one of them. He did not react. He pulled out a chair at the little table by the window and sat down like a man with nowhere else on earth to be. Now here is the part that nobody in that bakery understood yet, including, for a few more minutes, Maurice himself. 20 years ago, Camille Boudreau had not stopped loving him. That was the thing he had believed every single day since the night she ended it, that she had simply changed her mind, found him too much or not enough, the way young people do. He had built an entire life on top of that wound. 3 championships, an empire, a reputation for being the calmest man in any room. And the whole time, the truth had been growing up 200 miles from him, learning a crossover in an alley, climbing a doorframe one pencil mark at a time. What Maurice Carver had absolutely no idea about was one single fact, and when he finally understood it, this man who had never once been speechless in his life, not in front of cameras, not in front of presidents, not in the loudest arenas on earth, was going to lose the ability to speak entirely. So stay with us for the whole video, because the secret Camille Boudreau had carried alone for 20 years was about to walk in through the back door. And what she gave up to keep it is going to stay with you for a long, long time. Maurice and Camille grew up 4 streets apart in Eaton Springs, the kind of town where the whole sky was one color and everybody's mother knew everybody's business. He was tall before it was useful and quiet in a way people mistook for slow. She was the loud one, the funny one, the girl who decided in the 10th grade that the big shy kid carrying his little brother's memory around like a stone was the one she was going to marry. They were together 6 years. His mother, Della, loved her like a daughter. They had a plan, the specific impossible plan that only 20-year-olds make. A small house on the north side, her bakery, his coaching job at the high school, Sunday dinners forever. Then the letter came. Not a bakery letter, his letter. A full ride to a program across the country. The kind of chance that came to exactly one kid from a town like Eaton Springs in a generation. The door to everything he eventually became. He had 2 weeks to decide. And he had already decided he would only go if Camille came with him. He never got the chance to make that offer. Because 1 week before the deadline, Camille sat him down on the bleachers of the old high school gym, the place they'd had their first kiss. And she told him it was over. That she'd been pretending. That she didn't want the life they'd planned, didn't want to leave, didn't want him. She said it flat and cold and final, each word landing separately, and she did not cry, and she did not explain, and she got up and walked out of the gym and out of his life. He was destroyed. And then, because he was 22 and there was nothing left to stay for, he went. He took the scholarship. He became Maurice Carver. He carried one sentence from that night for 20 years. The last real thing she said to him before the cold part started. So quiet he almost missed it, almost convinced himself he'd imagined it. One of us has to be brave enough to lose this on purpose. He never understood what it meant. He assumed it was just a sad thing sad people say. He was wrong about that. He was wrong about all of it. Camille Boudreau had not stopped loving Maurice. She had ended it because, the same week his letter came, she had found out she was pregnant. She was 21. She knew him better than he knew himself, and she knew with total certainty what he would do if she told him. He would stay. He would turn down the one door that came to one kid a generation, and he would coach at the high school and be a good father and a good husband. And some part of him, the part that should have been on a court 1,000 miles away, becoming the thing he was born to be, would die slowly over 30 years. And he would never once blame her, out loud. Which would somehow be worse. She had watched her own mother live exactly that life. A man who stayed because he had to, and resented it in 1,000 small silences until there was nothing left of either of them. So Camille made the worst calculation of her life on purpose. She decided that loving him meant making sure he never knew. She broke his heart cleanly, so it would heal cleanly. She let him believe she was cold, so he would not look for a warm reason. And then she raised their daughter alone. She had wanted to be an architect once. She had a folder of drawings under her bed. She let that go too, quietly, the way you let go of a balloon you've decided not to chase. And she opened a bakery instead, because it had hours a single mother could survive. And she put every dollar and every hour into a tall, fierce, laughing girl who had her father's hands and her mother's stubbornness and no idea, none, that her father was one of the most recognized men in the country. What she did was wrong. She knew it was wrong. She had robbed 2 people of 20 years of each other. And she had done it out of the largest love she was capable of. And she had paid for it every single day, alone. And she would tell you both of those things were true at once, and that the contradiction had never once stopped hurting. She had told exactly one person the whole truth. Her best friend, Yvette, who had begged her for 19 years to pick up the phone. It was 8:55 when the back door opened and the basketball stopped. A girl came in from the alley, 19 years old, 6 feet of her, ball on her hip, earbuds in, already mid-sentence. "Ma, Coach Hadley says the scholarship's official. They faxed the—" And she stopped, because there was a stranger at the window table, and her mother's face was doing something she had never seen it do. Her name was Simone. Yvette, prepping dough at the far counter, went very still. Miss Pearl, 73, who had come in for the same cinnamon roll every Saturday for 11 years, set down her coffee and watched over the rim of her glasses without saying a word. Coach Hadley's name still hung in the air. Maurice looked at the girl in the doorway. He looked at the height of her and the way she balanced the ball without thinking, and the long fingers wrapped around it. And before you find out what he said, before Camille's 20-year secret finally has to be spoken out loud in a room with everyone in it, you need to understand that this man, who had stayed composed through the biggest moments a human life can hold, was about to come apart completely over a girl's hands. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The whole bakery held its breath. "Camille." His voice came out rough. He didn't look away from the girl. "How old is she?" Camille's hand was at her throat, at the ring under her collar. She didn't answer. She didn't have to. The math was already happening on Maurice's face, 20 years of it, arriving in stages like a tide coming in. He stood up slowly. He crossed the small bakery. He stopped a respectful distance from the girl who was staring at him with her mother's wariness and his own steady eyes. And he did not reach for her. And he did not announce himself. And he did not make a single dramatic sound. He just looked at her hands on the ball. And his own hands started to shake. And he said the only thing in his whole enormous vocabulary that he could find. "She has my hands." That was the convergence the whole room had been standing inside for 20 years. The photograph turned away from the door, the pencil marks climbing the frame, the ring on the chain, the crossover in the alley, the scholarship letter under the register. None of it was a coincidence, and none of it was a stranger's life. It was his life. The part of it that had been growing up 200 miles away while he became famous for being calm. Camille had not left him because she stopped loving him. She had left him because she loved him, and she had been raising the proof of it, alone, every day since. And Maurice Carver, for the first time anyone could remember, could not speak. Here is what he finally did, when he found his voice again. He did not turn on Camille. He did not demand to know how she could have, or count the birthdays he'd missed, or make the moment about the 20 years he'd lost. He turned to her, this woman who had wronged him in the deepest way one person can wrong another, and he saw, all at once, exactly what it had cost her to do it. "You said it on the bleachers," he said quietly. "One of us has to be brave enough to lose this on purpose. I thought you were just being sad." His eyes were wet now, and he let them be. "You weren't losing me. You were giving me everything I became, and you carried her alone so I could have it." He shook his head slowly. "I don't know how to thank somebody for the worst thing they ever did to me." Then he turned back to Simone, who had not moved, whose ball had slipped down to dangle from one of those long, familiar hands. "I missed every single thing," he said to her. "Every height mark on that door. I'm not going to pretend I didn't. And I'm not going to try to buy it back with a check because you can't. He paused. But I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere this time. The scholarship's yours. You earned that without me. The rest of it, the catching up, that's going to take the rest of my life, and that's fine. I've got the time. I should have had it all along. He looked at Camille one more time. One of us was brave enough to lose this on purpose, he said. Let me be the one brave enough to come back. Miss Pearl, who had said nothing for 11 years of Saturdays, set down her fork and said it to the whole room. Took you long enough, son. Sit down. Your daughter bakes a better roll than her mama, and that's saying something. So look at what one ordinary Saturday undid. A best friend who'd kept a promise for 19 years and finally got to watch it break the right way. A 19-year-old who walked in from an alley with a scholarship and walked toward a father. A woman who gave up an architect's life and a first love and 20 years of telling the truth. All out of a love so big, it looked from the outside like cruelty. And who finally got to set it down. And a man who built an empire on a misunderstanding and got handed back the one thing the empire couldn't buy. His mother used to say, a person's whole life turns on what they're brave enough to lose. Camille was brave enough to lose him on purpose. And Maurice, 20 years too late and right on time, was brave enough to come back. If you've ever loved somebody enough to let them go, drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from. We read every single one. If this story moved you, hit that like button because it helps stories about quiet, complicated love find the people who need them. And if you believe it's never too late to come back, subscribe and join this community. There are more of us than you'd think, and we are not too late. Your next story is already waiting on your screen. We will see you there.